Have you ever noticed something strange about your life? You know exactly what you should be doing. You know the habits that would improve everything. Wake up earlier, exercise, focus, work on your goals. None of it is a mystery, and yet, you still don't do it. Instead, you scroll, you delay. You promise yourself, I'll start tomorrow. But tomorrow quietly turns into next week, and next week slowly becomes someday. Now here's the uncomfortable question. What if the real problem isn't laziness? What if the real problem is something deeper, something invisible? Because the truth is, most people aren't lazy. They're trapped. Trapped in a pattern they don't fully understand. A loop that quietly steals their motivation, their focus, and eventually, their confidence. Psychologists call it habit formation. But in real life, it feels more like quicksand. The more you struggle, the deeper you sink. And the worst part? At first, it doesn't even feel dangerous. It feels comfortable. Let me explain. Imagine two different versions of your evening. In the first version, you finish work, put your phone away, and spend 2 hours learning something valuable. Maybe you build a skill. Maybe you work on a personal project. Maybe you exercise. Hard? Yes, but meaningful. Now imagine the second version. You sit down for just a few minutes on your phone. One video turns into 5. 5 turns into 20. Suddenly it's midnight. Your brain feels tired. Your goals feel distant. And you tell yourself, I'll start tomorrow. Be honest for a second. Which version happens more often? Because this is the lazy trap. Not dramatic failure, not huge mistakes, just thousands of tiny moments where comfort quietly wins. And here's the twist nobody talks about. Your brain is actually designed to fall into this trap. Your brain loves efficiency. It loves easy rewards. And modern life is full of them. Fast entertainment, instant dopamine, endless distraction. All perfectly engineered to capture your attention. But here's where things start getting interesting. Every time your brain chooses an easy reward, it learns something. It learns that effort is optional. It learns that discomfort should be avoided. And slowly, without realizing it, your brain begins rewiring itself. Now pause for a moment. Does this sound familiar? Because if it does, you're not alone. Millions of people wake up every day with the same quiet frustration. They know they're capable of more. They know they're wasting time. But somehow, they can't break the cycle. And that's when the dangerous thought appears. Maybe I'm just lazy. But that thought is a lie. A very convincing one. Because laziness is not a personality trait. It's a system failure. A pattern of habits that slowly took control of your behavior. And the worst part? The longer you stay in that pattern, the more your identity changes. You stop seeing yourself as someone with potential. You start seeing yourself as someone who procrastinates, someone who lacks discipline, someone who always starts things but never finishes them. And once that identity forms, it becomes self-fulfilling. You expect yourself to fail. So you do. But here's the part nobody tells you. Escaping the lazy trap isn't about forcing yourself to work harder. In fact, trying harder is often what keeps people stuck. Because willpower is temporary. Eventually it runs out. Then the cycle begins again. But wait. This is where everything starts to change. Because the real solution isn't motivation. It's understanding. Understanding how the trap works. Understanding why your brain resists effort. And understanding the one shift in thinking that breaks the cycle completely. But before we get there, there's something uncomfortable you need to realize first. Something most people avoid admitting. Sometimes the reason you feel lazy is because your mind is protecting you from something deeper. Fear. Fear of failing. Fear of looking stupid. Fear of discovering that you're not as capable as you hoped. So instead of risking failure, your brain chooses delay. Because delay feels safer. No risk, no judgment. Just temporary comfort. But that comfort comes with a hidden cost. Every day you delay, your confidence shrinks a little. Every promise you break to yourself, your self-trust weakens. And eventually something dangerous happens. You stop believing you're capable of change. Now think about that for a second. Is that what's really happening? Because if it is, then the lazy trap is not about productivity. It's about identity. But this is exactly where your story begins to change. Because the moment you understand the trap, you stop blaming yourself. And once blame disappears, real change becomes possible. But the next realization about laziness might surprise you even more.
Here's something strange about the human mind. It doesn't resist effort. It resists uncertainty. That's the part most people misunderstand. Because when you look at someone who seems disciplined, someone who wakes up early, works consistently, stays focused, it looks like they have more willpower. But that's rarely the truth. What they usually have is clarity. Clarity removes friction, and friction is what fuels the lazy trap. Let me show you what that looks like in real life. Imagine you decide you want to improve your life. Sounds good, right? But what does that actually mean? Should you start exercising, learning a skill, building a business, reading more, meditating? The moment your brain sees too many possibilities, it freezes. Not because you're lazy, because it doesn't know where to begin. And when the mind feels overwhelmed, it does something very predictable. It escapes. Scrolling suddenly feels easier. Watching another video feels harmless. Procrastination quietly becomes the default. And that's when the second layer of the lazy trap appears. Decision fatigue. Every day your brain is forced to make hundreds of tiny choices. What to eat, what to watch, what to respond to, what to prioritize. By the time you finally sit down to work on something meaningful, your mental energy is already drained. So the brain chooses the easiest option, not the best one, just the easiest. Now here's the surprising realization. Highly productive people aren't stronger mentally. They're just better at reducing decisions. Think about it. Many successful people wear similar clothes every day. They follow simple routines. They repeat behaviors. It looks boring from the outside. But that simplicity removes friction. And when friction disappears, action becomes easier. But wait, here's where it gets real. Because even when you remove distractions, even when you create a routine, there's still one invisible force that pulls you back into the lazy trap. Your emotional memory. Your brain remembers past discomfort. Every time you struggled with something difficult, every time you felt overwhelmed, every time you tried and failed, your brain stored that experience. And now, whenever you approach a similar challenge, your brain whispers something subtle. This didn't go well last time. Maybe we should avoid it. It doesn't shout. It doesn't panic. It simply nudges you towards something easier, something familiar, something safe. Now think about your own life for a second. How many goals have you quietly abandoned because starting again felt exhausting? How many times have you told yourself, I'll get serious next month? Be honest. Does that feel familiar? Because if it does, you're experiencing the emotional gravity of the lazy trap. But here's the fascinating part. Your brain isn't trying to sabotage you. It's trying to protect you. Protection was useful thousands of years ago, back when survival depended on conserving energy. Back when unnecessary effort could mean starvation or danger. But today, that same survival instinct is working against you. Your brain thinks effort is risky. But modern life rewards effort more than ever, and this creates a strange conflict inside your mind. Part of you wants growth. Another part of you wants comfort. And comfort usually wins. Not because you're weak, but because comfort is immediate, growth is delayed, and the human brain struggles with delayed rewards. Now here's a thought that might change the way you see yourself. What if laziness is not the absence of motivation, but the presence of the wrong rewards? Think about it. Your phone rewards you instantly. Entertainment rewards you instantly. Comfort rewards you instantly. But learning a skill, building a future, transforming your life, those rewards take months, sometimes years. So the brain keeps choosing what feels good now, even if it hurts your future. Now pause for a moment. Which one are you right now? Someone trapped in the cycle, or someone starting to see through it? Just think about that quietly, because awareness is the first crack in the lazy trap. But awareness alone isn't enough. Most people understand their habits. They still don't change. So the real question becomes, what actually breaks the cycle? And the answer might surprise you. It's not discipline. It's not motivation. It's something far more powerful, a shift in identity. And once you understand this shift, escaping the lazy trap becomes far easier than you ever imagined. But before that shift happens, something uncomfortable must occur first. You have to confront a truth most people spend their entire lives avoiding. And when you hear it, you might feel a little exposed. But it's also the moment everything starts to change.
Here's the truth most people quietly avoid. Laziness often hides something deeper, not weakness, not lack of intelligence, but a silent agreement you made with yourself a long time ago. An agreement that sounds like this: don't try too hard, because trying too hard means risking failure, and failure hurts more than people admit. Think back to the last time you truly committed to something. Maybe it was a goal, a project, a new habit. For a few days, maybe even a few weeks, you were motivated. You told yourself this time would be different. You imagined the future version of you, disciplined, confident, successful. But then something small happened. You missed a day. You got distracted. Life got messy. And suddenly that voice returned. You already messed it up. So what's the point? And just like that, the momentum disappeared. Now here's the part nobody talks about. It's not the missed day that ruins progress. It's the story you tell yourself about it. Your brain loves patterns. So when you break a promise to yourself, even a small one, the mind starts forming a narrative. I always do this. I can't stay consistent. I'm just not disciplined. At first, those thoughts feel like observations, but over time, they become identity. And identity is powerful. Because people rarely act against the identity they believe about themselves. If you believe you're someone who procrastinates, you'll unconsciously continue procrastinating. If you believe you're someone who quits, you'll find ways to quit, not on purpose, just quietly, just automatically. Now pause for a moment. Does that feel a little too accurate? Because if it does, something important is happening. You're starting to see the real structure of the lazy trap. It's not about tasks. It's about identity loops. Behavior creates belief. Belief reinforces behavior. And the cycle repeats. But here's where things get interesting, because the cycle can work in the opposite direction too. A single action can start rewriting identity. Not a huge action, not some dramatic transformation, just one small proof. One moment where you do something slightly harder than usual, and suddenly the brain registers a new signal. Wait, maybe I can do this. That moment matters more than most people realize,
Because confidence doesn't come from thinking. It comes from evidence. Tiny evidence, repeated over time. But wait till you hear this. The biggest mistake people make when trying to escape laziness is aiming too high. They decide to completely reinvent their life overnight. Wake up at 5 a.m., exercise daily, work for hours, eliminate all distractions. It sounds heroic. It feels powerful. But it rarely lasts. Because the brain interprets sudden, massive change as danger. Too much discomfort. Too fast. So eventually the system collapses. And when it collapses, the old identity returns even stronger. See? I knew it. I can't stay disciplined. But here's the shift that changes everything. Instead of trying to become a different person overnight, you become someone who wins small. Ridiculously small. So small, your brain barely resists. 5 minutes of focus. 1 page of reading. 10 push-ups. A single action, and then you stop. At first, this feels almost pointless. Your brain even whispers something sarcastic. That's it? But something powerful is happening beneath the surface. Your identity is being rewritten. Because every time you complete a small promise, your brain records proof. I'm someone who follows through. And the more proof you collect, the stronger that identity becomes. Now think about this question for a second. What if discipline isn't about pushing harder, but about collecting evidence of reliability? Evidence that you keep your word to yourself. Evidence that effort is normal. Evidence that progress is possible. Because once the brain starts believing that story, action becomes easier. Not because life gets simpler, but because your identity shifts. And when identity shifts, the lazy trap begins to lose its grip. But there's still one final obstacle most people don't expect. One hidden force that quietly pulls them back into old habits, even after they start making progress. And once you see it, you'll understand why so many people relapse into the same patterns. But you'll also see exactly how to break free.
Now here's the final obstacle. And honestly, it's the one most people never notice. Because the lazy trap doesn't disappear the moment you start improving. It evolves. At first, laziness shows up as obvious procrastination, scrolling, delaying, avoiding work. But once you start escaping that phase, the trap becomes more subtle. It disguises itself as comfort. You make a little progress, you complete a few small habits, you feel proud for a moment, and then your brain whispers something dangerous. You deserve a break. Now, sometimes that's true. Rest matters, recovery matters, but comfort has a strange ability. It slowly expands. 1 break becomes 2. 2 becomes a whole day. A day becomes a week when nothing really happens, and before you realize it, the old pattern quietly returns. Not with drama, just silence. That's why escaping the lazy trap isn't about a one-time breakthrough. It's about building awareness. You start noticing your patterns. You recognize the voice of comfort when it appears, and instead of blindly following it, you pause. You ask a different question. Not, what do I feel like doing right now? But, what would the future version of me choose? That question changes everything, because the future version of you is not lazy. They're calm, focused, disciplined, not because life is easier for them, but because they learned to trust themselves. And trust is the real escape from laziness. Think about it. Every time you break a promise to yourself, your brain quietly stops trusting you. When you say you'll start tomorrow, the mind doesn't believe you anymore. But when you follow through on even the smallest commitments, trust slowly rebuilds, and something powerful happens. Action becomes natural, not forced, not dramatic,
just normal. Now here's something interesting. The most disciplined people in the world rarely feel like heroes. From the outside, their lives might look impressive, but from the inside, their habits feel ordinary. They wake up, they do the work, they repeat the process day after day, not because they feel inspired every morning, but because they stopped negotiating with themselves. They removed the argument. They decided who they are, and once that decision is made, behavior follows. Now pause for a moment. Imagine waking up with that kind of clarity. No internal debate, no constant guilt about wasted time, just a quiet sense of direction. You know what matters, you know what needs to be done, and you simply begin. That version of life feels lighter, not easier, but simpler, because the mental noise disappears. But here's the truth. You don't reach that life through massive change. You reach it through tiny decisions repeated consistently, tiny decisions that seem almost invisible at first, finishing what you start, keeping small promises, choosing effort over comfort when it counts. Those moments build momentum, and momentum builds identity. Eventually, the story you tell about yourself begins to shift. You stop saying, "I'm lazy." Instead, you think, "I'm someone who's learning discipline." And over time, even that evolves, until one day, you simply become someone who takes action, without drama, without overthinking, just steady progress. That's the real escape from the lazy trap, not forcing yourself to be perfect, not chasing endless motivation, just becoming someone who shows up, again and again, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's boring, even when nobody notices. Because that's the secret most people miss. The life you want is built in ordinary moments, quiet choices, small actions, simple consistency. And once you see that, laziness stops feeling like a personality flaw. It becomes something you understand, something you outgrow, something you replace with a stronger identity. So here's something worth thinking about tonight. Right now, which version of you is making decisions? The one that seeks comfort, or the one quietly building a better future? Only you can answer that. But the good news is this: every single day gives you another chance to choose, another chance to show up, another chance to become the version of yourself you've been imagining. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Escaping the lazy trap isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming the person you already know you can be. If this idea stayed with you, don't just let it pass by. Sit with it. Think about it. And start with one small action today. If this conversation felt meaningful to you, stay around, subscribe, and keep building a life you don't need to escape from.